Funding for this program is brought to you by Bismarck Big Boy. From pizza burgers flying style to fast and delicious fried chicken, Bismarck Big Boy has been a local legend since 1954.
Paul would run into Arnold Palmer there, and, he'd say, "Well, do you remember me, Arnold?" He said, "I remember everyone that beats me." He said, "You're Paul O'Leary." And that's when Arnold Palmer was getting pretty famous, too.
John O'Leary served under Lieutenant Colonel George Custer, and his wife Mary Catherine was a midwife at Camp Hancock. Their first son, Jack, was born in 1872. Their younger son, Tom, was born in 1882 and became a professional golfer. In 1969, the Tom O'Leary Golf Course was named in his honor.
My uncle Jack, I never knew him, of course. He was gone when he was 10 years old. He died of smallpox. He was the first white boy. I don't know, there could have been Native American. There was a white girl that died first, and then he was born right down in Camp Hancock, right here in Bismarck, on Main Street, and that was the only hospital. St. Alexis wasn't built yet. And my grandma was the midwife there. She delivered babies. And my grandpa he was in the Civil War under Abe Lincoln in Virginia. He had come over from Ireland and was with the Army. He came up here with Custer's service. That's how he made his living in the Army. So they went to Fort Rice. That's where he was stationed, at Fort Rice then. They lost 6 children in 1 week of smallpox. But then Grandma O'Leary, her name was McCarty, and she was from Castle, Ireland, in County Kerry, Ireland. She had 13 children, and 6 died in 1 week of the smallpox, and they had 7 more. And my dad was the youngest. Tom O'Leary was number 7. After 6, the 13th, he would be the 13th. He went through the 3rd grade, my dad did. I don't know where he went to school. He never talked about it. He had 7 children then, and he thought, I've got to find a job. And there was an opening at the golf course. And he had to, survive with all those kids to raise. So he applied, and he really didn't know how to play much golf. But he learned. He was a good athlete. He was a boxer and a wrestler. And so they hired him in the 20s, way back in the 20s. Yeah. I don't know how he got lessons. So once they said while he was in California, Walter Hagen, he talked to and showed him a little bit, but he didn't know too much about it. He learned on his own, mostly. He went to California after he had, how many kids were there? My oldest. See, there's 24 years between my older sisters and me. So I didn't know about all this till I got older. But they went to school in California. They took the train out there in the dirty 30s, I think. Everyone was moving, like the grapes of wrath. They all wanted to get out of the Depression. And they went to Long Beach, I believe is where they went. And my oldest sister graduated from high school there, Nadine. She won the state golf tournament 8 times before she was 32. And then she got MS and had that until she was 78. She's the one that went with Harold Schaefer. That. We walked every place. Yeah, we never owned a car, ever. And my dad never drank. He never touched liquor, ever. We were teetotalers, always, no liquor in our house. Because his dad, the Irish are known to drink and that. Well, 13 kids and 6 die in a week. I think I'd drink too. That was, in those days, it was tough and they were poor. It was a little shack over here, 1 bedroom, and there's 7 kids, but they were spread out, There were Davenports all over where people had to sleep, Everything was mud. I prayed for a cement sidewalk for Christmas. That's all I wanted. And my kids can't believe that. Mom, what? Well, that's important when you're a young kid to have, a boyfriend come to pick you up in a muddy path coming up to your house, And there were papers all over the floor because Mom would scrub the floor always and have to put newspapers down so you could walk, And it was just no basement, nothing, just a cellar. You pull the cellar door up and look down. It was dirt down there with, cobwebs. And, I just would shut that right away. Yeah, so just 1 bedroom, a little tiny closet for all of us. Yeah, but we made it. All I did was ice skate. I lived for skating. I broke my nose at 7. Right here, you can see the cut in it. And it was just hanging off. And I went home and to Pa, I said, Pa, look at my nose, it's cut off. Somebody got a skate right across it. And he put a Band-Aid on it. I didn't go to the hospital, nothing. We never went to the hospital in those days, ever. Well, nobody had insurance, or Dr. Rowan was his good friend, Rowan Conrads and all the Conrads. And he would stop there, and they used to have the barter system. You do something for me, there was no money exchanged, no bills. You didn't get a bill in the mail. And my dad would give him golf lessons, and he would operate on one of the kids who needed appendix or something. There was no money exchanged, Pa said. A handshake. Your word was good. And you give what you can do, and they give their expertise and what they can do. And that's the way it was then. My mom's name was Genevieve Peterson O'Leary. She was born in Minnesota. Yes. I think it was Bald Eagle Lake she was born, around White Bear Lake in Minnesota. My mom, she was a saint. She went to church every day of her life. She was a convert, too. She was Methodist. And she took Pa when they were first married. She said, well, you come to my church. Well, he fell asleep in church. So he said, you come to my church. Well, then she became a Catholic. She converted, And we lived close to the cathedral. You just walk over there, Yeah. And there was a skating rink down there, too, in the warming house. My dad watched that in the winter. So he said, these kids tie knots in their skates just so I have to untie them. But he'd sit around and talk, stories to the kids and that. Yeah. And he would trust me in the pro shop when I was in the 7th and 8th grade to watch the pro shop, I'd sell tickets and tees and golf balls and he'd put trust in me, which that was kind of nice. He said, you get out there and practice. And, it wasn't pretty like now. Everything's green and plush and, the Tom O'Leary's all green. It was tumbleweeds and bull snakes, that's all. And I had to get out there all by myself because no girls played. till I got a boyfriend, Ellen Van Heuvelin. So we'd play golf together. Yeah. Yeah.
Help tell the stories of Bismarck's past and become a financial sponsor of this program. Contact info@bismarckhistory.org to learn more.
I was the youngest. I was a spoiled brat, of course, because Paul was 10 years older than me. There was a boy, Dennis, he died. He would have been 4 years older than me. He died of strep throat at 2. And they didn't have penicillin then, So they cut a hole in his throat. That was in the early 30s, before I was born in 37. I wish he would have lived. He would have been 4 years older. But the next was Paul. He was 10 years older than me. So, they said, you had it easy. Pa was a lot more strict with us, But, I didn't give him any trouble or anything. Paul went on the golf circuit when he was 20. He had won the state golf 3 times, 16, 17, 18. And then he worked for a year to get some money so he could go on the tour. He worked at Gamble's, I think it was. And then Harold Schaefer sponsored him on the golf circuit. For 5 years, he helped. And he put on his golf bag, he had gold seal, glass wax, advertising for Harold Schaefer. So then he went into the Army, though, and got in special services over in the Philippines. And he didn't have to fight or anything. My older brother was in Iwo Jima fighting in the Marines at 17. They always would fight about that. They were just 2 years apart. Said, you didn't have to go in the service. You were in special services. He played in golf tournaments while he's in the service. That didn't seem fair. And track meets and that. But then when he got out, then he went back on the pro circuit and played with Arnold. He beat Arnold Palmer in Rye, New York. That's when Arnold was just starting, And he used to see him down in Florida. He'd go to the Jackie Gleason Inverary Classic back in the 60s, I think it was. And Paul would run into Arnold Palmer there. And, he'd say, well, do you remember me, Arnold? He said, I remember everyone that beats me. He said, you're Paul O'Leary. And that's when Arnold Palmer was getting pretty famous, too. And then Sam Sneed, too, came up here and hunted with my dad. And because my dad loved more hunting better than golfing, really. He loved to hunt. And they went down to Selfridge. But I don't have pictures, nobody took pictures much. So that's a shame. We don't have a picture of Sam Sneed up here. Sam would play golf. He'd take his shoes off when his feet would get sore and play golf in his bare feet. Nobody knows that, I don't think. Well, Lawrence Welk was still in Strasburg then. He was just playing little gigs around North Dakota, I think. And he always kind of looked up to Paul Cook. And Paul Cook was a cousin of ours. His mother was Julia O'Leary. That's how they're connected. My dad, Tom, and his sister, Julia, married William Cook. And he was the sheriff of Bismarck, Bill Cook. And that was his oldest son, Dr. Paul Cook. He got a scholarship to Northwestern on a golf scholarship right out of Bismarck High, graduated from. And he and my sister then were real good friends because they played golf together. And he was older than her a few years. But anyway, when Paul went out, Dr. Paul Cook was a family physician, and he went to Santa Maria, California. And he met Lawrence out at the Santa Monica Ballroom. That's when Lawrence Welk first started with his music, you know, the bubbles and stuff that you see on TV. That started in Santa Monica. And then it went to Escondido. And then he started a big golf course there because Paul showed him how to play golf. And they were good friends in all that time. It starts way back, way back. Riverwood was just developing in '69. That's when Riverwood started. And they had a contest that they wanted somebody to name it. So there were lots of entries. And I asked Pa, I said, what do you think, Riverwood, Pa? Do you think that'd be a good name? You know, it's by the river and in the woods. Oh, he said, try it, you know. So I submitted that name and I won it. And we got a free membership for all 5 of my kids. So I started them all playing golf when they were this little. I taught them how to play, and I entered them in tournaments right away and stuff. You know, they were so excited. But that was the same year then. Riverwood was named, and Tom O'Leary. See, it was Bismarck Country Club before. And so they changed it then to Tom O'Leary because he retired. And when was it? He retired in '68, I think it was, yeah. He retired. And then they had a tournament each year then with his name on it, you know, yeah. Till he was, 88, he was down at Riverwood. He had his little bag. I have a few of his old hickory clubs downstairs. I saved those. And his bag that he had to give golf lessons, he had a bag of just golf balls and nobody to pick them up except me. I'd go out and pick them up and get 50 cents maybe, you know. And I still kept all that stuff, yeah. Edwin Lips, he was senator, mayor of Bismarck for 12 years at 32. Of course, you know, he was married to another lady, and they had 3 children. But I was in high school when he was the coach at St. Mary's. And then he ran for mayor and became mayor of Bismarck for 12 years, and then was a senator for 38 years. I came back from California. My husband had died out there after 12 years of marriage. He died of a heart attack. That was very sad. And Evan, his wife, had died 2 years earlier. I called him up. I said, Evan, this is Marilyn. We'd known each other all our life, you know. And he was a good friend of my family. He always liked my dad and everybody. And I said, would you like to play golf? Oh, I'd love to, he said. So that's how we started playing golf at Riverwood. And then we'd go to the Elks and go dancing. He loved to dance, and I did too. So then go to dinner, you know, and then we just started going together. For 6 years we went together. Then we were married for 4 years. And he died in '05, January 9th, '05. Yeah. Great guy. Well, it's just developed, my gosh. Well, that Garrison diversion, you know, everything. I remember deer coming down on big pieces of ice down Memorial Highway, you know, before the Garrison diversion. Everything was flooded south of the tracks, you know, and we knew a lot of people that lived in shacks down there, a lot of Irish, O'Connor, and there were, let's see, who else was down there? Mostly Irish people. I got a gold medal in Arizona when I was 70. I went on a 10K, and I beat I don't want to brag, though. I beat these gals over 50. It's right there, that gold medal. It's right up there. It's a beautiful one with the cactus that spins around, you know. It was a senior Olympics, it was called. Yeah. Yeah, it's in Arizona. Nobody would do anything, and I thought, I love sports. I'm going to get out and do it. And the track meets and stuff too, you know. My dad loved all the bums in town. You know, every bum, you know, this Eddie Meter, I don't know if you've heard of him, with the big overcoat and that. When it's 100 above out, he had a big overcoat on. Oh, Pa, he was good friends with him. And we'd invite him up to the house, and he'd have senators there too. And we'd have all these bums even come in, and he'd tell them ghost stories because they didn't have a car to go back, and it was getting dark out. And they'd walk out of the house just shaking because Pa liked to tell stories. He loved to tell stories. That was his entertainment. No drinking in bars, nothing. Telling stories. He could always tell a story, but not crack a smile. He had a deadpan expression, you know, like Jack Benny type or Groucho Marx or something. He liked them. Yeah, or Will Rogers, kind of like, he was that way, yeah.
Help tell the stories of Bismarck's past and become a financial sponsor of this program. Contact info@bismarckhistory.org to learn more.
I asked Pa, I said, what do you think Riverwood, Pa? Do you think that'd be a good name? So I submitted that name and I won it.
Remember when the Capitol burned, I looked out and there was this black stuff going by the window.
The president of Woolworth at the time's name was Kirkwood.
My parents decided, I think my mom decided that Bismarck needed a zoo. So